Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of a Modern Nonprofit podcast. I'm your host, Tosha Anderson. We talk about all things related to nonprofit, operational, especially on this podcast. I like to joke that I am an accountant, but I really have a love for operations. And one of the things that is really difficult, I think, for any business, my own included, right now is recruiting the right candidates. And I have my new friend Kimmi Cantrell here today that works exclusively, or not exclusively, I should have not assumed that, but works with a lot of nonprofits. Do you work exclusively with nonprofits, Kimmi?
It is exclusively mission-driven organizations. So, it's a wide range of mission-driven people, mostly, yes, identify as nonprofits.
So Kimmi works with recruiting talent for nonprofit organizations. And I think anybody here struggles with just a lot of things when it comes to recruiting, HR, employee retention. I mean, all of the things. I used to work for a nonprofit. I used to be in charge of HR. Coincidentally, some of you all may not know that. So I can understand the pain in this particular area. So today we're going to talk a little bit more about how to recruit the right candidate and some of the things that you should kind of be looking for. And if you know somebody looking to get into this nonprofit space, what are some of the things that they should be considering along the way? So Kimmi, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really excited to talk about this.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited too.
So let's just dive right into the first question. What are some tips to target the right candidates in this nonprofit world?
It's a great question. And honestly, like you mentioned, hiring is really challenging, especially right now. We are coming off the tail end of a pandemic, and
Mhm.
um, people are saying things like, we're going to see the great resignation. There's all these rumors around about what's happening in the market. And so it really is a challenging space. But I think, it's also a really exciting space because when you are hiring, that means you're growing your team in some capacity, no matter what, whether it's because somebody left or because you're adding a new position. And so I really try every hiring manager I speak to remind them that this is an exciting time, even if it feels overwhelming for you.
Mhm.
But some tips to find the right candidates, I think, obviously I'm a little bit biased, but I think partnering with a staffing firm is a really great way to go because unless you're focused in your role on just exclusively recruitment and hiring, you have 100 other things to do. And I think, you post a job these days and you get hundreds of write-ins and maybe like 3% of them are actually qualified for what it is that you're looking for. And so
Mhm.
working with a staffing firm or with a recruiter can really help you to file through all of those write-ins and to say, okay, here are the ones that are, worthy of your attention. Here are the ones that really fit what we're looking for. And they kind of help screen through the process so it saves you time. Because, a lot of times the nonprofit sector, the person doing hiring does operations and internal employee satisfaction, and they have a lot of, they wear many hats, as we like to say. And so I think the first way to help yourself is to delegate the responsibility to somebody who can focus their full attention to it. But I do think some other ways are definitely just to be really clear and intentional on what it is that you need. If you post a job and you know that you must see ABC on a resume. If you don't see ABC, move on. I think oftentimes we can get really caught up in looking at a resume and seeing the potential. And I think there's potential in everybody and in every resume. But when you don't have the time and you really just need the talent, I think being really clear on what you want is going to help you move farther faster.
Mhm. So what do you hear from candidates that are driving them to want to enter the nonprofit space? So not necessarily people leaving, but that are wanting to enter into the
hmm
nonprofit space.
I love that question. I actually do a lot of coaching in this area of people saying, I've worked in X my whole life, and now I'm waking up wondering, what am I doing with my life? And I want to do something else. And so helping people understand what that transition can look like and providing them with the right resources into making that step. Because you and I talked, very briefly before this conversation, but it is very similar. There's people think it's these two starkly different worlds, and sure, there
Mhm.
are differences, but at the end of the day, they're both operating organizations that are looking, that have an end goal in mind, and it's just how you approach it. And so I think the main reason I hear people saying that they want to transition into the nonprofit sector is because they want to do the same work that they're doing, but for a cause that feels meaningful, where they wake up every day and feel excited to go to work and feel like they're doing something that makes a big impact on the community, on the country, on the world at large, whatever their passion point is. Most of the time, that's why I find people are gravitated towards the sector, because your heart's involved, and when your heart's involved, it's a lot easier to get motivated.
Yeah. So speaking of people going from, let's say, the for-profit to the nonprofits, like for-profit space to the nonprofit space, what would you say the biggest difference from kind of an employer-employee relationship, or what that looks like from being an employee from the nonprofit to the for-profit space? What's the difference between the two?
Sure. I think the biggest difference people love to talk about is pay. I think definitely a lot of times, for example, let's say you're a marketing communication professional. If you're a vice president of marketing in a for-profit company, you probably will make more money than a vice president of marketing in a nonprofit company. What I want to say is that I think there's also a stigma that you won't ever get paid well at all in a nonprofit, and that's also not true. You can have a wonderfully abundant and financially secure career working in the nonprofit sector. And so whoever told you that, just rid that idea out of your mind, because it's not true. But that there may be a difference. There definitely, you may see a difference there. I think another difference a lot of times is just vernacular. Sometimes the way that we discuss things, in for-profit, we say things like sales, and in the nonprofit sector, we never say the word sales. It's development and fundraising, and it's donor contribution, but it's, at the end of the day, it's all still the same, of looking for revenue in order to help boost the mission. And so I think sometimes the vernacular is a little bit different. And then lastly, what I've heard people say a lot is that, again, in the nonprofit sector, you wear many hats, whereas I imagine in for-profit companies, you have your duties and your responsibilities, and you only do those. And in the nonprofit sector, I find more people roll up their sleeves and help out in other areas. They say, well, this is my job, but I also do a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And so I think that those would be my top three differences that I hear people speak of the most. Is, the pay can be a little bit different, the vernacular sometimes changes, and then wearing the many hats and doing more.
Gotcha. So if I could throw a wild card at you a little bit, what would you, because I'm sure you've talked with people that are in the nonprofit space already that are just taking a leap into a different position within the nonprofit space. What do you think is the biggest reason why people are making jumps at this point? Do you have a sense?
That's a great question. And I think right now, so many people spent the last year reevaluating everything, reevaluating who they are as a person, how they want to show up as an individual, as a worker, as an employee, as a family member, and I think right now we were faced with this reality that nobody was anticipating and nobody was expecting. And so I think it gave people just a lot of time to evaluate, who do I want to be and how do I want to do it? And so I've noticed right now, so many people wanting to chat with me, or be in our candidate pool, or, whatever the case may be, because they just want to make sure that what they're doing aligns with their ultimate dream. And I think before, it's easy to get complacent. It's really easy to say, well, I'm good at this, so I'm just going to keep doing that and not really challenge myself all that much. And then I think when we were put, face to face with the reality that was 2020, so many people took the time to say, you know what, maybe I am comfortable, but I don't want to stay that way. I want to grow. I want to stretch. I want to do more. I want to contribute more in a different way. And so I think that's really why I'm noticing right now so many people want to make that change, is because they're just ready for something new, and they want to make sure that at the end of their life, they can say, I gave it all. I did everything I could. I pushed and I stretched and I grew. And so that's what I would say, is one of the biggest reasons why people are looking to make a big change.
It's good. It's helpful. So for those that haven't been in the nonprofit space and want to break into this space, what would you recommend to them if they don't have experience in nonprofits but wanted to get into this space?
Such a good question. And my first response is going to say, be networking. I think the nonprofit sector, it's so much, I don't want to say it's not what you know, it's who you know, because what you know is also important. But networking is huge. If you are able to make a connection with somebody and they can refer you into an organization, I think people just really trust that. So whether that means you're networking with other nonprofit professionals, nonprofit job search groups, recruiters that work in the nonprofit sector. I work for careers in nonprofits, and we're a staffing firm exclusively in nonprofits, but we're not the only ones. There's not a whole lot, but there's a handful. And so, definitely just building out your network, because people will help you make your dreams come true. And so the more people that you tell what your intentions are, the more likely you are to have some help in getting there. And so whether that means that you talk to a new person every single day, but my number one tip is to start networking with people who are doing what you want to be doing so that you can be in the same space that they are. And then obviously, there are a lot of job boards out there, but targeting nonprofit job boards such as idealist.org, I think, is a great place to start too. But again, I think what's really going to be the most key is the more networking you can do, because then you can learn the language, you can understand the process, you just will get a better inside view, and it won't maybe feel as intimidating once you do have, friends where you're looking to go.
Gotcha. That's great. That's great. And two, I would think, serving on boards or committees or volunteering and really showing your kind of, mission focused heart and wanting to get into this space, which also is a great way to network, right?
Absolutely, exactly. And I think often too, people feel like because they volunteered to do something that they can't put that experience on their resume. And I absolutely think that that's not a good decision. If you've been volunteering on a board for the past 5 years, put that on your resume. Show people that you've already been in the sector. You just haven't been paid by an organization to work for them yet. But understanding the inside of an organization, whether it was through a paid experience or a volunteered experience, goes a long way. So definitely, include those things on your resumes too.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And so I guess really my last question, so specifically on the skills that you would recommend for the resume building or otherwise experience, what skills should one focus on to make this transition into the nonprofit sector?
Such a good question. And I think it obviously depends on what your background is. So if you are a salesperson and you want to transition into development and fundraising for the nonprofit sector, if you can get experience with grant writing, that's amazing. If you can get, certified with Razor's Edge or Salesforce, understanding that having these certain tools will help you kind of make your transition. But obviously, I think that that's different for somebody who's, let's say, an HR manager. You don't necessarily need to do grant writing in an HR role. So I think that there's a lot of organizations, Candid is one of them, that offers like free workshops on nonprofit topics. And so you can attend virtual workshops, in-person workshops, but really being able to learn more about the sector, I think really will give you the skills that you need for your specific field. But honestly, what every nonprofit is looking for across the board is mission driven, smart, humble, hungry professionals. And so those can't necessarily be taught. There's no class on how to be an ideal nonprofit professional, but people who really understand collaboration and understand teamwork and understand some of those soft skills, I think, are what really make it easier for someone to make that transition. And so being your authentic self, being your true self, coming to terms with who you are and really showing up in that best version of you, I think that goes a much further way than saying, okay, great, well, I have this grant writing experience, which yes, certainly will help. But I think really understanding that you're going to be a contributing member to this team who's looking to make the world a better place. How are you going to help be a part of that? I think that's a really valuable skill.
Love that. Love that. And so unique depending on which organization or which mission or what, what
Exactly.
you're passionate about. It's
Hmm.
really amazing. You can't make up the passion for certain things and the
Right.
excitement you have for certain things.
Yep.
So that just comes naturally. And when you align
Exactly.
those two things, what technically you're good at and the passion that you have, it's just amazing how much, I guess, more rewarding. Not always easier, but
Right.
rewarding, as you mentioned earlier in those multiple. So Kimmi, this has been really, really helpful. And I think there's a lot of people that are probably interested in making this space. As you mentioned, a lot of soul searching over the last year. What am I doing with my life? Interestingly, I get that a lot, even for business. Hey, I'm an accountant. I don't want to be an accountant that way. I'm interested to hear more about, you're an accountant now. Of course, I'm biased, but I say, hey, if you're going to be an accountant, this is the coolest way to do it. over here, but there's many people that are probably interested in joining your talent pool to be, helped, placed, and assisted throughout this process. Or there's probably nonprofits out there that are really struggling to find that great mix of person that they're looking for, especially as you mentioned earlier, the time consuming element to properly recruit, vet, interview all of those, candidates. If they wanted to get a chance to chat with you, or learn more about the work that you're doing or how you might be able to help them, what is the best way for them to find out, you know, that information, or where would they go?
Absolutely. Well, the easiest way to find me is on LinkedIn, honestly. So it's just Kimmi Cantrell, KIMMICANTRELL. I'm fairly active on LinkedIn. I have a nonprofit job seeker LinkedIn group. If anybody would like to join it, just feel free to request, and I'm happy to let you in there. But sending me a message, I respond to pretty much anybody. So feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, but you can also email me at KCANTRELL@cnpstaffing.com.
Sounds great, Kimmy. Thank you so much. This has been really helpful. And anybody looking for more information on how to break into the nonprofit space or to find those people to help you with your nonprofit, definitely reach out to Kimmy. Kimmy, thanks again for being on. This has been awesome.
Thank you for having me.